Now then, may we have our next contestant, please? Will you come in? Will you tell our panel, please, what your names are and where you're from?
Tony Spargo of New Orleans.
Tony Spargo of New Orleans. And your name, sir?
Eddie Edwards of New Orleans.
Eddie Edwards of New Orleans. All right, gentlemen, now if you'll whisper your secret to me, we'll show it at the same time to the audience at home. Here we go. This concerns something these gentlemen did, and Bess, I think I'll start with you if you don't mind.
Shall we do it all together?
No.
No? We all remember the number, 119-187102. Wrong!
It's wrong.
7201. Anyway,
Well,
gentlemen.
I can't take time to find it now. It's buried in there somewhere, but that's
Tony, let me
incorrect.
ask, this thing that you did simultaneously, the same time,
Well, yes.
Right.
and the same place?
Yes.
You were there together. Was it a physical thing?
No.
Did it have anything
Let's
to
say it was partly physical, partly mental. $20 down, $60 to go. We go, please, to Bill Cullen.
Did you do it together?
Yes.
Did you do it in a sense of a competition to each other, like, as opposed to...
Oh, you know what? Were they opponents in this
Yes.
thing?
No.
No.
Were there any people involved beside the two of you?
Yes. Yes.
Were you part...
$40 down, 40 to go. We go, please, to Betsy.
Well, Mr. Spargo, you nodded your head yes to the physical, and Mr. Edwards nodded his head no.
What?
So you were the mental one and you were the physical one in it. Is that it?
No, it takes the same amount of mentality and physical.
Oh.
Did you happen to invent something, do you think?
I don't
Do we think?
No.
It wasn't, it was something, did you do this as young men? Together?
Very young.
You knew each other as
All right,
young
we've
men.
lost $60. We have only 20 left. We go to Henry Morgan, please.
Nothing's been established, just that you both did it together when you were young men. That's out of all these...
True. So lots of rock, Charlie.
Thank you. Was it done in New Orleans?
No. No.
Was it a productive thing that happened, that you did?
Yes.
Did you create something?
Yes, they created something.
Is it something that we use today?
Yes. I think so.
May I reach across you, sir? Panel, perhaps this picture will help you. This is one of the most famous pictures in all of American jazz annals. Mr. Spargo and Mr. Edwards were members of this group, the original Dixieland Jazz Band. And until they came along, no one outside of New Orleans had ever heard this style of music. These are the men who introduced Dixieland to Chicago, New York, and eventually the entire country. Their secret tonight is that they made the first record of Dixieland Jazz way back in 1917. It sold over 1 million copies, which, well, it's a lot today, but in those days was fantastic. Now, Mr. Spargo, how did your style of music, what you fellows played, differ from what was then being played as jazz?
Well, the band consisted of a trumpet, trombone, clarinet, piano, and drums.
What we now know is the basic Dixieland Five.
Typical jazz band.
Now, prior to your instrumentation, what have they been using in jazz bands?
Old violins, shells,
Gee, really?
banjos, guitars.
Well, was Dixieland music an immediate success in Chicago and New York?
Not right off the reel, but after the first 2 weeks.
Well, they made their biggest splash, the one that was heard all over the country, when they appeared here in New York at famous old Reisenweber's restaurant. And the crowds packed in to hear this new sound, this innovation. The crowds were so heavy that the cover charge was invented. Just for how much was the cover charge, Mr. Edwards?
25 cents.
25 cents cover charge to keep the riffraff out. Yes, Henry.
Now, Mr. Spargo, Mr. Edwards, one or the other could answer this for me. I read somewhere recently, that picture is a very well-known picture of that band. I read that the piano was a dummy in the picture.
As a matter of fact, it was. The piano is, as you can see, hollow. As a matter of fact, Mr. Edwards on trombone is standing inside the piano where the works ought to be.
The inside's taken out.
It was a photographer's prop. The picture was made in a photographer's studio. Now, we have some other members of the former members of the band here, so if we can open the curtain, please, I'd like to introduce them. The original leader of the band, Mr. Nick LaRocca, was unfortunately could not be with us tonight, but I'm happy to say that he is watching down in New Orleans. Sitting in for him on trumpet is the very famous Phil Napoleon, who played with the band during the 1920s. Phil, of course, was the leader of his own group subsequently, the famous original Memphis Five. And on clarinet, we have Tony Parenti, who also played with the band in the 1920s. That's Tony there. And on piano, we have Russell Robinson, who joined the band in 1918. And Mr. Robinson has another claim to fame. He's the composer of a song that you might just possibly have heard of. It's called Margie. So if you're all set, gentlemen, let's listen to the song recorded in 1917 and written by these gentlemen as a group. They wrote it together. Here it's called the original Dixieland One-Step. Now, what I think you would find as fascinating as I do is that although all five of these gentlemen are still quite active in music today, they are playing together as a group tonight for the first time in 25 years. First time in 25 years. Unless you think these are retired old-timers, Phil Napoleon, for instance, got a brand-new album out with a swinging Dixieland group. Tony Parenti has had a Dixieland band for 4 years over at the Metropole now and is still playing there.
Thank you.
So these are swinging men. Now, also, what's very interesting was that they had no catalog of jazz standards to go back to because there was no jazz. They had to write their own. They wrote that, and they wrote what we're going to use as our closing theme tonight instead of our usual theme. They wrote together, working it out on the stand, Tiger Rag. So, gentlemen, you're on.
Got a Secret will be brought to you next week at this time by Winston Cigarettes.